Good morning, Angela here at Sew Bright Alpine Quilting. It's a lovely sunny day here in Bright, and unfortunately we're not at Craft Alive in Townsville and Cairns for the next couple of weeks due to it being postponed. So we thought we'd drop in and share with you some of the things that we would have had on our stand and talk about some of the classes that we would have done as well. So this morning we're here to talk about slow stitching. So grab a cuppa and we'll get started. Slow stitching, hand embroidery, English paper piecing, hand piecing, all forms of slow stitching, and nice portable projects which can help when you are sitting in airports. I like to stitch in airports, or in the car, or watching the kids playing their sport, however you like. It's always nice to have something in your hands, something to occupy you while you're watching TV. So today I'm going to show you some of these lovely mini mandalas. They're from Nikki Turbo Designs, and they look great just displayed in the hoop. You can leave your hoops plain, or you can decorate them with washi tape, stitch the designs in a variety of colours. There are 9 different designs. I'll just flick through them for you. So if Steve wants to come in a little bit closer, I'll just flick through them. So there's A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and the last one is I. So they come individually, or you can, I think we have one set that has all 9, and you can get the hoops as well, and 9 different skeins of beautiful Valdani thread in a selection of colours. So these are some of my favourite colours. I hope that you would like to stitch with them as well. Otherwise you can just let me know what colours you'd like and we can pick them out for you. So the Valdani threads are the only thread on the market that is guaranteed colour fast. They are 100% cotton, and these ones are 6 strand. We also have the pearl threads in pearl 8 and pearl 12 in a variety of colours. Some in little boxes and some are individuals. So, where to get started? You have to start with a stitchery. So Nikki's stitcheries are great because they come already printed on the piece of cotton for you, with the nice little design lines. Now in the little packet you will get a colour photo of your design, and then you get a black and white printout of the design which you can trace again and use again if you prefer. There is no stitch guide with these because Nikki wants you to be creative and choose your own stitches. So you would just look at the lines and the symbols that are marked on the design and choose what you want to stitch, whether it be running stitch, back stitch, stem stitch, chain stitch, lazy daisies, French knots, colonial knots, lots of different stitches that you can do, and there's lots of different resources out there on showing you how to stitch those stitches, but I'll just show a few of my favourites today. So to start off we need to stabilise the back of the piece of fabric, and we do that with this little product here called Stafflex. So it's an iron-on woven stabiliser. So we iron that on the back of the fabric, and that just helps to, as I say, stabilise the design, and it also helps to hide the threads as you move from one part of the design to the other, so that when you hold it up you can't see all your little stitches on the back. So we've ironed that on the back of this piece, and we're going to load it into a hoop. It's personal preference whether you stitch in a hoop or not. I like to stitch in a hoop. Sometimes I stitch in the 6-inch hoop, and sometimes I will even go down and stitch in a 4-inch hoop as well. Nice little design, nice little size, because it's important to be able to reach the center of the hoop with your finger to help you control the movement of the needle and create smooth stitches. So to place the work in the hoop, we put the ring on the table, place our design over the top, And as these fit in a 6-inch hoop, you shouldn't need to move this around, whereas if you were using a 4-inch hoop, you would need to move the hoop around as you stitch through the design. And then we just loosen off the screw on the top hoop, place that down over the top, nice and firmly, tighten it up and smooth out the fabric so that it's reasonably taut, and then just push the inner hoop up slightly, just that makes it a little bit easier to work on it. So then we need to thread our needle and we can get started. So today I'm stitching with this gorgeous raspberry. This is 0522 raspberry, and it is a 6-strand thread. So with the Valdani threads, I like to use approximately elbow to fingertip in length. If you have too much thread, it can cause knotting. And if you are knotting, if your thread is knotting as you're stitching, it means you've got it upside down, as the Valdani thread has a nap. So it's the way that the threads are wound onto the spool as to how smooth they are one way or the other. So to work out which way to thread your needle, rub your fingers down the strand, turn it upside down and rub it the other way. And one way will feel smoother than the other. So this was the way that felt the smoothest. So then we're going to come back and take out 2 threads, because this is 6-strand. We'll take 2 threads out, and then we're going to separate those threads again to help them relax. And when they're relaxed, you get a nicer stitch. You won't get any twisting. And of course my fingernails are a little bit short at the moment, so it makes it a little bit difficult. Okay, so 2 strands, wash them back together, and then you're going to thread them onto your needle. Now, needles. I like to use the John James or the Richard Hemmings needles, and with 2 strands you can use a number 7 needle. If you're stitching with 1 strand or with silk thread, you can use a 9 or a 10. They have smaller eyes and the needles are quite a bit shorter. And if you are stitching with the pearl thread, I like to use the number 5 needle. It's a bit longer and it has a nice big fat eye, which makes it easier to thread the thicker threads. So today I'm using a number 7, and we thread it up, and then we need to tie a knot in the end. So to do that, grab the tail of the thread, hold your needle in one hand, bring the tail up to the top of the needle and wrap it around twice, turn the needle upright and pull the thread down to create a knot on the bottom of the thread strand. Now, if you look at your design, you can see you've got solid lines and dashed lines and circles and little teardrops here. So as you can see earlier, I did some back stitch along this line, some running stitch. We've got a couple of French knots here. We've got some lazy daisies, and this lazy daisy here, we've actually filled it in with another stitch through the center of it to make it a solid petal. And then this one here is a little buttonhole stitch we've stitched in a circle. I think they call it a spiderweb stitch, I'm not sure. But anyway, and out here we have done some stem stitch. So I'll just quickly run you through those stitches and hopefully you'll grab some hints along the way. So to start with a running stitch, you bring the needle up at the stitch and you've got your, oops, of course that happens when you're demonstrating. Just re-thread that needle. Looks a bit. And if you're having trouble threading your needle, try turning it around the other way. Make sure you've got a nice sharp point on your threads to help with you getting it through the needle. And if all else fails, a little bit of spit helps as well. We've got to get those 2 threads through the needle. Okay, here we go. So with running stitch, it's a matter of rocking in and out. So you use your finger on the back, and you can do more than one stitch at a time if you like, if you're game. So I've got 2 stitches on there, or you can just do 1 stitch at a time. You can also do the stab method, where you go down and put the needle back in from behind as well. I think the stab method is easier to do when you're not stitching in a hoop. So that's running stitch. So with back stitch, you can you start a little way along the line, however long your stitches are going to be, and then you go backwards before you come forward. So you go back into the other end of the line and come forward, and then for the next stitch, straight down into where you came out before and up along the line. And you can use your finger on the back to guide you. Just try not to prick your finger and bleed on your work. So we pop our needle in and we create a nice long line that looks solid. If you start to get some gaps in there, it means you're not taking that needle back through that exact same hole. That comes with practice, and we're trying to get our stitch length pretty much the same all the way along the line. When you get to the top of the curve, you might want to take your stitches a little bit smaller, just so that it doesn't create a pointy curved line.
No worries.
So we keep going around the curve until we get to where we want to finish. So with this one here, I would keep stitching around this line here until I'd done it as much as I wanted. But just so that we can show you some other stitches, I'll just take that one down in there and I'll show you the buttonhole stitch. So on this circle, we're going to come up on the outside of the circle, going to hold the thread across in one hand, go down into the point and come away a tiny little stitch, and have the thread coming over, the needle coming over the top of the thread to form a buttonhole stitch. I'm going to move around, take it back into the centre and move around the circle, and just keep taking stitches, going back into the centre and pulling that tight. So just a little something different to do instead of just doing back stitch all the time. Create a little bit of interest in the work. So it's flicking up. And don't forget to keep moving your hoop around just to make it easier on yourself. Don't try and stitch backwards. It's not good for your hands, your elbows, your wrist, or your fingers. If you're having trouble gripping the needle, you can also use a thimble. You can have a thimble on your finger underneath to help with gripping, or you can use a needle grip. Just a little plastic dot that you stick on your fingers just to help pull the needle through if you're having trouble with that. So last one, back into that same hole, over the top, and then back down on the other side of that thread just to finish that one off. So that's your little buttonhole circle, which is very cute, creates a little bit of extra dimension. So for a lazy daisy, we come up on the bottom of the petal, hold our thread, take it around in a circle, go back into the same hole, and then come back to the end of the petal. Give it a nice gentle tug until we get the shape that we want. These threads have come apart a little bit, of course. And then just down onto the other side. And if you wanted to fill that petal in, you would come up again just inside that point. Oh, of course it goes down. Sorry, threads are not cooperating this morning. So you go down in that point and then go back in the other end of it. can also, if you're having trouble threading the needle, try turning the needle around the other side, because they do, some needles do have a right and a wrong side, the way that they're stamped. So one side will have a bigger indent than the other. Okay, so then we go back down inside our Lazy Daisy. Not entirely happy with that one, but see what happens when I fill it in. Looks a little bit messy, so we might pull that one out later and do it again. I'll just show you again. Thread's getting a bit short. So in the point of the petal, out the top of the petal, gently, that's better shape, and through the bottom, and then you can fill it in if you like. Now to do a French knot, come up in the indicated spot. I always find it much easier to do the French knots when they're in the hoop and placing the hoop down on something solid, whether it be the table or if you stitch on a little cushion to support you. Sometimes I also stitch on a placemat, so I would have a cork placemat, and sometimes I put that down so that I have a nice steady surface to work on as well, especially if I've got my nice table underneath and I don't want to poke it with a needle. So French knot, hold the thread out to one side, come back in with your needle over the top of the thread and wrap it around at least twice. The more times you wrap it, the bigger your knot will be. Pop it back into the same hole, hold onto that thread as you pull the needle through, and then create a beautiful French knot. So again, wrap it around twice. Some people also like to do, if they're doing lots of French knots, they might change to a milliner's needle, because a milliner's needle is the same width, the needle is the same width down the whole length of the shaft. So you do actually get a slightly nicer knot, especially a colonial knot. I would generally do those on a milliner's needle. So there we have a few different stitches. I'll just finish off on the back of the work and I'll show you how to do that. So we flip it over. Once we get an unusable piece of thread, you tuck the butt of the needle underneath a previous row of stitching and create a loop and tug on that to create a little knot. So do that a couple of times just to finish off the work so it doesn't become unravelled, and then you can come back with your little scissors and snip off the excess threads. To do a stem stitch, we'll go back to this one that we started earlier. Oops. It's very similar to a back stitch, but you just go back a little bit further. So we're coming up the stitch length that we want, that we would normally have for a back stitch, and then we go back into the stitch before, and you'll see it as you come along. So that we're taking quite a long stitch underneath, but what shows up on the top is only very small. So it creates like a rope effect. So you push the thread out of the way, go back down into that previous hole and come up in front. So you can see it's creating a bit of a ropey texture and a very solid line. So it's great if you want to emphasize the outline of something. And in this case, it will become the decorative outline of the hoop part. And so we just keep going, stitching along like so. Back halfway up in front, the length of the stitch. So the stitch on the top is quite long, but because it gets wrapped around the other one, it creates that ropey texture. And now to finish, you would take it down into the back, flip it over, and in this case we'll have to flick it out of the hoop to tie off because we don't have enough room to get our needle through there. So we take our needle back through the back again, create that loop, give it a little tug, don't lose the thread, back through there again and give it a tug, nice and strong, and snip it off. If this was going to become something that was going to get washed regularly, you might want to come back through with a bit of fray stopper onto all of your little knots just to a little bit of extra security. But because this is just going to be a decorative piece and we're going to finish it in a hoop, we're not worried about the stitches coming undone, because it's just going to be hanging on a wall or hanging somewhere. So to finish off, once you've finished, you can, as you can see with these ones, we've finished them with washi tape, and that was Nikki's great suggestion. So instead you could also paint it with some craft paint if you wanted a coloured hoop, or of course leave it entirely naked. So then you would give it a good press from the back when you're finished, and then you would come back through with a washout pen. In this case I'm using the Sew Line Styler washout pen, and you would mark a circle where you want to cut off. So it's usually about 3/4 of an inch to an inch outside that hooped area, and then you would come back with your scissors or your rotary cutter and cut that out. And then when you pop it back in the hoop, you have a nicely trimmed area which you can glue down in place with some Aquadeer or school glue. Any sort of runny white glue works best, and it would look like this one here when it's finished. The other ways you can finish it off is you could glue a piece of decorative cardstock on the back. You would make that slightly bigger, so you would have a decorative piece of paper on the back. You can also finish them in a square, like this one here has just a little binding added, and it's just been stapled on the back of a little frame, so it can just be hung like so. And same here, if you didn't want anyone to see your stitches on the back, you would just cover it with a piece of card or another piece of fabric. The other way you can also make a decorative edge is with some rickrack. So on this little hoop here, this Craftiness is Happiness hoop, which features some applique and some embroidery, you can sew a piece of rickrack onto your finished edge, and then that will also help to hide that raw edge and give you a little decorative rickrack effect to it. So this one is called Craftiness is Happiness, and it's from Molly and Mummy. You'll see that on the website. Other stitchery designs that we have from Nikki are the large mandalas. Most of these are similar designs to what we've just shown you, but there is also 9 of those, and they are 10-inch finished. So this is the finished size of those. This one is actually in a 12-inch hoop at the moment because I didn't have any 10-inch, but we do have 10-inch now. So that you can easily, as you can see, you can just, if you want to see more of the fabric behind, you can display it in a 12-inch hoop, or if you want it to be closer, you can display it in a 10-inch hoop. The other designs we have from Nikki are this gorgeous butterfly bag, which features this beautiful stitchery, which you can make into a bag. So this already comes with the design printed on the cotton. And then you also have the Be Friends set, which is a little stitching book, a needle keep and a pin cushion, and there's also a scissor keep in there as well, and that has all of the designs printed onto the fabric for you. And then we have other embroidery designs from Rosalie Decker, and we have another set of flowers, which are the Australian flowers, the state flowers as well. On the website you'll find those, and then we have some beautiful books that feature embroidery. So we've got the Boho Embroidery. Nicole's a favourite of mine. Follow her on Instagram. So she uses a lot of fabric in her embroidery and then embellishes them with thread and sequins in a boho style. So that's a great little book. Got lots of different projects in that one. Some of the books are more coffee table books. This one here is also a nice one that has lots of modern designs in it, and it also has the little designs that you can put into the little hoops, which we have the dandelion little creative little hoops, and lots of different designs for home decor or other stitcheries, little tea towel things, and quite modern. So that one's a nice one. That one's got lots of different projects in it, 15 projects actually. And then we have a couple of ones that are more like coffee table books, nice reading with a little bit of instruction, but not much instruction, but beautiful stories. So this one's called Stitch Stories. So Kaz has compilation of stories from different designers and showing you from the reading from the back here, illustrated with a wealth of inspirational examples of stitch stories from the Middle Ages to contemporary artists working today. So as I said, more of a coffee table book, but still inspirational if you are an embroiderer. The other one that I really like at the moment is the Textile Travels from Anne Kelly. So this one is also more of a coffee table book, although there are a couple of projects in this one. And Anne Kelly demonstrates how to capture your travels past and present in stitch, how moments in time on a journey can be distilled, remembered and artfully put together in textile art. So creating art journals, little keepsake stitcheries, and using photos as a guide and examples of your travel. So that one is also a really good book. I really love this one. And then other forms of slow stitching that we have are the hand piecing templates from Jen Kingwell, which are the postcard templates, postcard projects. We have lots of different ones of these, lots of different shapes. So this one is the hexagon. So you get the little Perspex template on there and it instructions on how to stitch them together. I'll just clear a space and then I can show you some of the ones we have made little things with. These little projects are great for using up your scraps. So these are all made from leftover jelly roll strips from Jen's remix range. So this is a nice little grandmother's flower garden hexagon that I've sewn together. There are diamonds. We have the tumbler shape, which is a very versatile shape that you can make into a Dresden plate. So some of them I've sewn together by hand and some I've sewn on the machine. So this one here, because it's a reasonable size template, I've sewn it on the machine. And so here's the tumbler version in just strips. So you can see how easily they go together and lots of different patterns that you can create. This one is little triangles. So this one comes with the two shapes in the template. So you've got this triangle and the side triangle. Some more tumblers. There's a couple of different squares. This little square here I've started to make into a little cushion. So that's going to be one of the little cushions, as I mentioned before, that you sit under on your hands, on your lap, to help you stitch, to help you bring your hands up, and so that you don't get so much strain on yourself when you are stitching. There's also a snowball, which is an octagon. There's the diamonds. More tumblers. We've got lots of tumblers. So if I take one of these strips and just show you how we cut out with them. I like to place the fabric right side down. And when you take your template off the card, it has a little sticky dot on there. So if you just leave that sticky dot on there and put it down onto the fabric, it helps to keep the shape in place as you cut around it. So there's two ways you can cut out. You can use your rotary cutter, or you can use a marking pencil. I like this Sew Line Trio one. It has 3 different coloured leads, a pink one, a white one, and a lead. So you can draw around the shape and you can cut it out with the scissors, or you can cut out with your rotary cutter. And this is also when a rotary cutting mat comes in handy as well, so you don't have to cut backwards. So before you lift off come back with your pencil and mark your registration points. So because we are sewing these by hand, we want our registration points to be marked on the back of the fabric so that we can see them when we're stitching. So we just pop the pencil in and mark our registration points. Then we can take that off, and so that we can sew a straight line, we take a little tool like this one, which is the 1/4+ ruler. So this is a 1/2 inch wide, and it has a line in the middle, so it creates a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can place that down on the outside of the shape and find your little registration marks and draw them. It would probably be handy at this point if I had my sandpaper board, which I don't, but I could probably use the back of my cork board. This is another handy use for the cork board. Stop it from slipping around. So draw your lines. You can also do it this way by going point to point. So you just draw your stitching lines in as light or as heavy as you like, and then you would take your two pieces right sides together. You can pin them with a pin, or you can pin them together with a little clip, and you would sew on those lines to create these shapes. So as I said, there's I think there's about 13 in the set. I think we've got 9 in stock at the moment. You can see them all on the website. And the others are some English paper piecing and applique. So this is the quilt called Opus Tweet by Helen Stubbings, and this uses Helen's method of the fusible polyfuse on the back of the shapes, and then you turn the edges over with a glue stick. Have I got one here? Yes. So this is it's like a block of the month, this one, so it has lots of different designs. This is some of the designs I'm working on at the moment. So this is another bird block with lots of little trees and things. So you can see we have the fusible paper. So this is a one-sided fusible on the back, and we've turned the edge over and glued it down with our glue stick, and now we just hand stitch the pieces together, and then we hand stitch them onto the background, and then they're embellished with extra stitching. So you can see here there's another variation of that buttonhole stitch that I showed you earlier. So in this case we've done it in the shape of a leaf, which is a little bit interesting. This one here is called a pistol stitch, where you take a long stitch and then do a French knot on the end of it.